My name's David, and I'm here to talk about the Flappy Bird that laid the golden egg. So just briefly about me and why I care about hyper-casual games. So probably like a lot of you, been making hyper-casual games for a very, very long time. Didn't call them that, didn't know it was hyper-casual, but any mini games, little prototypes, little plays with mechanics, little twitchy loops, little arcadey things. Been doing that forever for various brands and mini games and websites. We've also done a few what are now called idle games. Milk Me Winer, High Profits with Eastside Games. And we're working on an IO game, so a multiplayer hyper-casual game coming out, and we're excited to see how that goes. So, the interesting thing about hyper-casual is, how did we get here? How did this become a thing, right? Well, just as a quick spoiler, a little later on, we're going to show you some numbers, and basically half the downloads in mobile are hyper-casual. How did that happen? So you could really blame this guy, Dong Nguyen, and this is what Dong did. Please count. Please count. Oh, shit. So, thanks. Actually, I need that back, sorry. Ooh, and the spotlight too. All right, so Dong was inspired by that very activity. In fact, I think it was the even stupider one with the elastic attached to it, to make a game. So he was a programmer in Vietnam, and he coded a game in 3 days called Flappy Bird. So who here has played Flappy Bird? Okay, now raise your other hand. Now flap. No, come, it looks so cool. All right, so Dong, just a hobbyist guy, kind of messing around. He wanted to make a game that was just incredibly simple. And really the game was mindless, and I say this with genuine respect, almost in a Zen level of mindlessness. You lose your mind, you lose your concept of mind when you're playing the game. It's a one-touch game, you're touching it, there's pipes, there's birds, and there's a score. You live that score, you need to beat that score, and before you know it, hours have passed, right? So that said, it was a crappy game, right? It was a crappy, simple little hyper-casual game, but 50 million downloads later, publishers started paying attention. Hobbyists started paying attention. Everyone started saying, how do we do this, right? How do we replicate this success? In fact, the initial launch of Flappy Bird had no ads in it. And eventually, Dong was so overwhelmed by all of the success of the game, he took it down. So publishers started playing with this model and doing what, I think looking back, we can call super casual. So they took casual games, which were deeper but mass market games, and took these simple mechanics, often borrowed from historical great games like Crossy Road, borrowing from Frogger, Stick Hero, borrowing from any numerous arcade games, and simplified them down to a core, made them really, really tight and easy, and rolled them out. And you can see the numbers here. I mean, these are ridiculous. Even more ridiculous is a lot of these numbers came, by and large, organically. People, kids talking on the schoolyard and sharing the game at school with their friends. A game could easily get to the top of the charts, and it just would amplify the download numbers. So you really got this crazy, this way of achieving crazy huge downloads, right? So it seems kind of easy on the surface, right? Make a simple game, get crazy huge downloads, profit, and buy an island. Super casual gameplay, to really break it down, is really the same thing we've been seeing even in coin-op games from the 70s and 80s, right? Just you put in a quarter, very simple, friendly graphics. You understand by looking at it what's going on. You jump in, no tutorials or fatuis. I always want to do that every time I say that word, fatui. You just jump in, quick to start, really, really easy to get hooked, and usually if you like it, you play again. You want to get a little better at your score, and there's usually this very typical thing in game design where you ramp a challenge, right? You want things to get more and more challenging. You want that pain. You want to achieve that. You want the pleasure of doing that, and that's how these games work. Very simple stuff we all know as game designers, programmers, anyone who's ever played a game with any depth, right? Nothing kind of new here. So the company that best exemplified this super casual era from 2015 to 2016 was Ketchup. So Ketchup were two brothers out in France. They created a few of these games very simply, masterfully. They cloned a lot of existing games that were actually premium games and made them free and achieved success that way. They published a number of indies that created games and put them out there. And they got just crazy amount of downloads overall. And ended up netting millions of dollars per year. Ended up selling actually to, I think, Goldman Sachs recently. Another very interesting story in this era is this game Color Switch. Color Switch was actually built by a veteran who didn't know how to program. He picked up a tool called BuildBox. He just had this idea for a game that the ball changes color and can only go through moving objects of the same color. Again, it's a mechanic we've seen before in various ways. He just did it masterfully, really put love into the levels, and it became a huge success. Millions of downloads, and did quite well with that. So then something changed in 2017 amid all this other stuff going on, which was video ads, rewarded video ads. So, of course, rewarded video ads are always with us. They've always been out there. But ads at this point became, the networks became much more mature. So it was actually very cheap on places like Facebook or AppLovin to buy these ads, put a little clip of your gameplay out there, and people, especially young people and kids, would really click on them and always want to try the latest thing, right? It was just easy. Click on the ad, try it, and move on. And the other thing that was happening is because so many people were using these ads, the CPMs, the money you would get by putting these ads in your game, became quite high as well. So it didn't take rocket science, but it did take some insight to realize that you could arbitrage the system pretty well, right? If you could figure out a way to show more ads to players than you would spend to acquire the players, you could do quite well. And indeed, many companies took advantage of this arbitrage. Nobody more than the monster we call Voodoo. Voodoo were indie game players that had a few small hits of their own. They came out with the game Paper.io, a very hyper-casual, quote-unquote multiplayer game. Wasn't really multiplayer, but it felt like it was. And within years, they had, I think, 40 games the first year, maybe a few hundred games the second year. And they achieved, just in 2018, over 1 billion downloads. So how did Voodoo do this? They actually got even more mindless than Flappy Bird. And again, I say this with great respect. They took this super casual model of being easy to grok, quick to master, and the quick sessions, right? And what they did that's really, really counterintuitive to anyone who's studied game design or anybody that's really gotten to the essence of what makes a game, they took away the challenge, really, in a lot of cases. They actually made the game rewarding. You play the game and you do better and better and better and better. Do you get bored quickly? Eventually you do. The retention's pretty low. But you really have fun for a few days while you're at it. So one could ask, philosophically, are these real games? Is this really just a linear experience disguised as interactivity? And I have strong opinions on the subject, but we won't go down that path for now. But the point is they worked, and they worked really well. Not just Voodoo, but many other companies, indies, folks. 2018 was the year of the hyper-casual game, and it continues to this day, which I think if you look at the download stats right now, 55%, maybe even close to 60% of the games out there in terms of downloads are hyper-casual games. Right, so what we saw, if you want to break this little casual game market into epochs, you have your era from 2007 to 2012 of the premium casual epoch, casual free-to-play from 2013 to 2016, the super casual creeped in there from 16 to 17, and then we're now in the era of the hyper-casual game. Now, of course, that's not to say there aren't many other genres, blah, 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 but if we're talking about casual, this is really where the business has gone. So monetization goes way down. Premium casual, you'd actually spend a little money to buy a game. Hyper casual, there's often no in-app purchases at all. You're just playing and you're being monetized by ads. Retention, as we discussed also, has plummeted. But obviously there's something that's driving this, and it's downloads. It's just the sheer ease and ability to get massive, massive amounts of downloads, and that volume drives profit. So let's talk about profit. And I mean, I don't know, how many of you all consider yourself business folks? Cool. That's actually about a quarter. And you know, so if you're who considers themselves a hardcore indie gamer or game maker, game developer? Okay, also a small amount. So you know, a lot of times you won't think about the math if you're making a game. You think about the fun, right? But you really have to understand the math of how this works and how this breaks down, because it's going to drive your every decision in terms of how long you spend on the game, how polished the game is, and of course, what the final game is and how you distribute it. So, you know, if you want to break it down in one chart, it's not rocket science, right? The way you make money in the free-to-play business is you bring in more revenue per customer than you spend acquiring them, right? And hyper-casual, these numbers are low. Casino, these numbers are incredibly high, right? You'll actually maybe spend $100 to bring in a real money casino player, but they'll earn you much more than that once they stay. So let's look, you know, very quickly at a profit and loss sheet for a successful hyper-casual game. So on the expense side, not including the development cost, which essentially washes out once you have a profitable game. On the expense side, you have ads, right? You have to spend money on ads to acquire your players. Now, you might get some cross-promotion with a publisher, you might get featured, but you shouldn't count on it. You should count on ads as the thing you can predict if you're putting together a business plan. So a good hyper-casual game will have an ad cost of about 40 cents an ad. So that's the target we have to beat. If we can make more than 40 cents, we have a profitable game. So how do we figure that out? The beautiful thing about hyper-casual games and about the crappy retention in hyper-casual games is you could know very quickly by looking at the day one retention how much money your game is going to make. It's actually a proxy for the entire revenue of your game. And let me explain why, right? Like that chart on the right is your a typical retention chart where 100% of people play on day one. After day two, maybe 60% of people are not interested, they're not going to come back. 40% might be. And day three, that drops even more. And that curve is very steep for hyper-casual games because, as we mentioned, they kind of get boring after a while. You want to move on to the new one. But if you can get your retention to about 50%, that typically kind of breaks out to about a 5-day lifespan on average for players. And most games, again, this varies wildly, but most games will get about 3 sessions a day of people actually coming back and playing. Maybe you'll show 3 video ads per session, and let's say you can make a penny per video ad, which is reasonable, a bit on the high end. So if you take 5 times 3 times 3, right, you get 45 times a penny. So now we have 45 cents we've made from each player. Boom, we have a profitable game. Right? Make sense? Kind of? So if we zoom in on hyper-casual, from you as a studio's point of view or from a publisher's point of view, our goal is to be above this line, right, and profit. So if you take any 100 hyper-casual games that's probably everyone in this audience that say makes a hyper-casual game, we have a game jam, and everyone makes a decent game. So I'm not even talking about the really bad ones, just everyone makes a decent game that's somewhat fun and fun to pass around to friends. It's really, really, really difficult to know, looking at it, if it's going to succeed or fail. But what we have, and what's wonderful about hyper-casual games, and some would say horrible about hyper-casual games, is market testing. So you take 100 games and actually put it out there, and after a day or two, you can actually see what your day one retention is and plot that. A lot of your games are going to be 0 retention, right? There's just no one's going to come back. You might have a few outliers on the top that people are actually love, and they're just coming back for weeks and weeks or even months and months. Then do the same thing with video ads for those games. Make a test video ad for the game, do your best shot, put it out there, and remarkably, the cost for these video ads varies a lot, and actually remains consistent oftentimes, even though you could do slight optimizations. The video ad actually remains, whatever cost you see for the video ad, if you test it for a few days, actually ends up being the video ad cost that you would run for up to a million players. So again, you'll see very cheap video costs for most of them. Some of them you might see really expensive CPI costs because maybe the video art just doesn't appeal to people for whatever inexplicable reason. Maybe the game looks too similar to something else that's they've just played. And you just don't know until you try it. So you put it out there, try it. Now you take these 100 games and you plot the cost per install based on the video ad and the lifetime customer value based on the retention. And as you can see, you'll have a couple little dots that eke above the profit line. And this is, unfortunately, what the picture really looks like. But if you can take the ones that are near the line and put in some tricks that improve retention, like coming back and getting bonuses or achievements that give you a reason to come back, and better push notifications, and all the typical bag of tricks that increase retention. And of course, if you can smartly show more ads to players, you've now increased your lifetime customer value, and now you have more hits that have creeped above the line. Then finally, on the publisher side, the publisher uses the vast amount of data they have, and plus their network to cross-promote between all their games to drive down the cost per install. Now, by driving down the cost per install, you've even lifted more of those dots above the line. So most of them, just to be a million% clear, will fail. But the few that rise above the line, you now have a system, a provable system to pump marketing money into it and profit very, very handsomely. So, I mean, I almost view hyper-casual games as the crowdsourcing way of proving hits, right? And it kind of works with the thing we all know deep in our gut, is that none of us know what we're doing when it comes to making games. And this model lets you take some tries, take some shots, and prove right away if you have something that can be a good business or not. So where this is all going, and I think is pretty clear, and it's been this way for a while, certainly was in the social game business, and now it is in the mobile game business. We're basically replicating what we're seeing in pop music and in pop in general, right? So if you're a new studio coming out and you want to create a game, you can either put a lot of money into it and use months and months and months, if not years, of development cost, a huge team, maybe get a big license, do a soft launch for many months and tweak your metrics until you've got it working, and then spend tons of money on marketing, and plus use your relationships to get Apple and Google featuring and do quite well. And that of course works, but if it doesn't work, it's a very big risk for many companies. Or you could be the nimble dwarf, right? Just make a playable game, kind of a step or two above a prototype, lure players in with the cheap video ads to see if they like it, and see if they retain long enough to profit. Yeah, so is this easy money? Is this a whale farting a rainbow out of its blowhole? It's really not, as I think, if that chart wasn't clear to you and didn't illustrate enough, hopefully this picture will. If you partner with the publisher, what publishers do is this essentially this crowdsourcing. They will take your game as part of a swarm military tactic, which is a valid military tactic, and swarm the machine gun nest. And most of you will die. In fact, here, this was the reason I want the ball back. Let me say that again. Most of you will die. Thank you. But the ones that succeed, for very little effort, very little time put into the game, can do incredibly well. And the numbers prove that out, right? Even though it's a few cents per user, because of the multi-million downloads, that amounts to a great business. Now, whether you go at it alone or use a publisher is, of course, up to you. Every deal is different. You have to shop around. Publishers do have some great benefits for a pop system like this, just like a big music label has a big benefit to an aspiring songwriter. They've done a lot of deals with UA. They know how to optimize the price and get the cheapest ads. They've seen a lot about what works and doesn't work and can provide some really good advice. And of course, they'll have other games oftentimes that they can promote your game in and get you a lot of free traffic. So as far as which publisher to go to, Voodoo is still quite dominant, with almost 30% of the downloads single-handedly as a company. There's a new attempted King of the Jungle there, starting in August with Lion Studios. It was an offshoot from the ad company AppLovin. And there's some other players out there. And in the green band, that's just other publishers. And there's a lot of smaller up-and-coming publishers. And I predict a few of them will get up there in this big echelon of downloads in 2019. Here's a list of a bunch of them. And by the way, at the end, I'm going to post the link to the slides, so don't worry about all the math and logos. This will all be available online. And like I was saying, this really is resembling now to me, if you pull back, the pop music industry. You have tons and tons of eager hopefuls, many with quite a bit of talent. You have a product that's aiming for mass appeal. You are putting craft and speed over your artistry when you're actually building that product. You're trying to do something that's trendy, not innovative. You often are using repetitive beats and rhythms, or in our case, repetitive taps. And ultimately, there's a marketing and promo machine that proves out the winners. And of course, there is some risk. Sometimes it fails, but almost always, if the machine tells you you're going to have a hit on your hands, you do, and it makes sure you do. Right, and if there was a great NPR piece on Planet Money about how the pop music business works, and it's pretty fascinating, right? You get, once you're vetted as a talented songwriter by good producers, they'll have you come in and write a few songs. Of course, they'll throw most of those away, but the ones that work, they might get a better producer to really lay down a track and do a vocal producer, and finally, they might get some people to come in and focus test it and hear it. They might mix it and master it. All that's pretty cheap, right? That's about maybe $70,000, $80,000. And then once it's at that point, they'll play it in some test markets, make sure their thesis works in terms of marketing, and then spend the big money and jam it into everybody's ear hole. Whether you want to hear it or not, you're going to hear the pop song. And it obviously works, right? It's become a big business, and it's about doing the marketing at the tail end. So I think the question you have to ask yourself as a game maker is, are you Esther Dean? And for those who don't know Esther Dean, she's a face behind many of the hit songs that we listen to, and in my case, forced to listen to all the time, right? She's written many, many hits for people like Rihanna, Katy Perry, Nicki Minaj, Beyonce, Drake, Usher. I could go on and on and on. Songs like Firework and et cetera. And her process is pretty amazing. If you have a chance to see her on YouTube and just see her process, she's got a good voice, but really what she's got is this uncanny sense of finding a hook, right? Finding this part of a song that people can't get out of their head. And this is her process. She just goes in there and screams and yells and chants in strange language, strange gutturals. And when she feels that chill, she knows she's hit it. Everyone in the room knows she's hit it, and boom, they start printing the money. So it's pretty crazy. But if you feel you have that Esther Dean talent equivalent in game mechanic design, go for it, and you will do well. So I want to leave you with a few just big weighty thoughts about what this all means in terms of the games business, because again, it's some of it as from a data science level and a business level is fascinating. From a creative game making level, it's a bit disturbing and unsettling. So this is my first prediction. Right now, if you're into the world of ad networks, there is a lot of what they call AI. It's really just A/B testing done through algorithm happening in ad networks. In other words, you'll see one ad with a blue button, one ad with a yellow button. They'll see which one gets more clicks, and then they'll show more of that one. And then they'll show one with this little tagline. They'll show one with this little tagline. Whichever one gets more clicks, they'll give more dominance to. And it works, right? You end up getting ads that drive more clicks, and the market, you're crowdsourcing your problem, and the market is proving out which ad works the best and which ad they like the most. This is used not just in the game industry, this is used in all advertising. Games, I believe someone, and I think it's a problem people are working on now as we speak, people are creating systems that will design their own game mechanics. And again, as game designer, it's a little bit scary, but these systems will blend the mechanics and colors and art and shapes and music from all these other hit games, and create some truly horrible hybrid monsters, but somewhere in there, they'll also create, I believe, what's a hit that makes Flappy Bird, look like, what's a good bird metaphor? I don't know. It'll make Flappy Bird look like a flop, right? So it's scary, but talk to me in a year. We'll see if this happens. Big prediction number 2, and this is like maybe a ray of hope, but this is not going to necessarily last quite the way it is. It never does. None of these trends and markets do. Everything's getting crowded. There's too many people trying to go after the same prize. Too many publishers making too many games that are too much the same. Too many of these ads look the same. So audiences are getting bored with the same old. Publishers will hit a revenue ceiling, no matter how many aspiring studios and indies they work with to create that swarm effect. They'll just get to hit a ceiling of how many hits they're going to be able to get. And guess what? Everyone will discover this magical thing called engagement with good old-fashioned social features and narrative and deep play systems and multiplayer systems and saga maps and actually difficulty and level design and deep economies and blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that we've been doing in mobile and probably before. So that's pretty much it. That's the flap, and hopefully giving you some food for thought. Thank you so much.